Greetings, my friends. Welcome to the Let's Get Gritty podcast with Dr. India White. I'm so excited to be here with you today to talk about grit and to talk about all of the fabulous work that we can do to help our students. Before we get started with the show, I want to first remind you of a couple of announcements. First off, the Let's Get Gritty podcast with Dr. India White will be featured on Swain Girl Media channel, so please check that out. Thank you, Precious Swain, for that opportunity. Also, I'm loving the follow-up and the connections that I have been sharing with many of you on social media outlets. So I want to give others of you the chance to follow me and to connect as well. Facebook is Miss India White. LinkedIn is The India White. Twitter is Indie Speak and Teach. Instagram is Indie238. And my YouTube channel is India White123. So follow up with me. Let's make some things happen together. Also, if you would like to be featured on the Let's Get Gritty podcast, please send me your email with a photo and a bio to india.white.123@gmail.com. Also, you can go over to my website to check out the plethora of blogs, books, and to schedule me for your next speaking or coaching event, or even for various tasks, like if you want to do a grit workshop in your school district, or if you're wanting to do equity training or something like that, I would be available to help assist you with that. So thank you in advance for the opportunities, and let's connect. Again, welcome to the Let's Get Gritty podcast. I'm excited, and today we're going to talk about grit, but I want to talk about being relentless through grit. See, what I have found is that right now we are dealing with the culture of students who have been lacking motivation, and some studies have shown, unfortunately, that because they have been lacking motivation, it has been triggering anxiety and depression towards students when they're attempting various subjects, including math, English, and whatnot. And so we want to talk about how to help our children to become more relentless when they are pursuing their academic endeavors. So first off, we have to understand what is being relentless. So the definition of being relentless is defined as being oppressively constant, incessant. So basically somebody that is determined no matter what to accomplish a task, even if it's something that they deem as harsh, oppressive, or just wrong. They just have to get it done because it is a goal that they have. And some things I think of people that work out. I think of also different opportunities that people have when they set New Year's resolutions and they want to accomplish various tasks that they've never attempted before, but they're able to be successful, even, in tough times. Like you think of the Survivor show and things like that. And it just also, I want to kind of show what kind of comes to my mind when I think of this, of being relentless and everything. And I wanted to show you guys what some leaders are saying about being relentless. I just look at this. Relentless and grit defined. I found this online. This is Better Bodies. So the whole workout theme. I love it though. So there's this guy, he's all ripped and stuff, and he's doing his lifting. Definitely don't try that at home. I would not try that at home. I would be done with. Okay, so they say here, when you want to succeed as bad as you want to breathe, you will quickly find out that it takes grit and being relentless. It doesn't come overnight. It takes trial and error and learning and adapting and improving and consistently leveling up. I like that idea of leveling up. When your goal is worthy, just showing up doesn't cut it. A proper goal should require an insane work ethic. But to reach an insane level, you have to have passion and meaning behind why you are pursuing what you are pursuing. So, what will you do to succeed? The answer should be what it takes. I love this right here. That is what grit and being relentless is all about. And you can see these guys. I mean, these guys are not playing with y'all. You guys see these guys, these muscles. Okay, so yeah, so with that said, I just wanted to kind of go over that with you guys to help you better understand the whole idea and concept of being relentless. And what we are running into right now is students are also bombarded and overwhelmed with school. And some of them they have a fear and anxiety of education. I like talking about math because that's my area of expertise. Do you know that sometimes students, they have such a fear and anxiety of math that even walking into a math classroom is trauma. It's triggering moments of trauma and past abuse that they've experienced, whether it's emotional abuse or just mental abuse, different fears that they have, feeling like they're not worthy, feeling like they're not capable. And sometimes students don't have the ability to be relentless and to achieve beyond that because there's so much fear that has been built up over the years. And so we as educational leaders have to step in the gap and help them. I was listening to some people. I was out, I believe, at a conference not too long ago, and some people were talking about students who, they go home to get their homework done. And parents, if you're listening, I hope parents can relate to this, and if they see something, maybe make some changes. But they talked about how students will bring home their homework, in particular the math homework, and they're trying to get help with, say, algebra or learning fractions in fourth grade or whatever. And they open the book, and their parents, who are just frustrated and tired, are coming home and they're wanting to teach that child. But what they have found is that sometimes the parents are in a tug of war with that child, and it becomes a very unpleasant experience, to where the parents are eventually sometimes yelling at the student, pointing hard at the book, telling the student, come on, you should have known this, and none of this is how you do it. And the parents don't realize that that is paralyzing that child. And it's bringing tears. It's bringing so much mental weight and anxiety and pressure that is just unnecessary. We definitely have to do our best to help our parents so that they can help our children to be relentless no matter what. But this is just something I need parents to understand, and those that are working with students to understand. Even as educators, when we are working with children, how do we approach them? Because their ability to be relentless is being affected by some of these underlying issues as well, of how they are being approached in math. And that's why sometimes when you go to a student to work with them, you'll notice they might flinch, or they might, just have guards up and they are frozen because they're like, oh my goodness. Or if you say, how was your experience with homework last night? Sometimes the students, they have dealt with so much just where the math homework is tearing the family apart because the parent is frustrated, the student is frustrated, and it's all over a math problem. And that is not the main goal here of why we assign, challenging math or assign rigorous content, whether it's math or even other subject areas. But I say that because if we're trying to help a child become relentless, we don't want to do it by pushing fear. But we have to understand at the same time that before we even address being relentless, we have to look at those underlying issues of fear, trauma, anxiety, stressors that are there, and try to help our children to work through that with the growth mindset like Dr. Carol Dweck spoke about. So again, we're speaking today about grit and being relentless through grit. Now, if you don't know what grit is, I'm not going to stop coining Dr. Angela Duckworth, Queen of Grit. She said that it is passion and perseverance to obtain long-term goals. So that is what grit is, and my little acronym is great resilience in time. Something that you can just kind of remember, whether you're working out, whether you're working on a rigorous math problem, or you're just trying to make a sale or make ends meet, do whatever you need to do. Take grit with you everywhere you go. And so, long story short, grit is it, but we have to figure out how to help children to be relentless through grit. And so Dr. David Yeager did a study, and I'm going to quote a couple of the findings and things that he did in his study regarding being relentless. And so he says here, struggle is not normal, or not only normal, it can be good. So let me repeat that. Struggle is not only normal, it can be good. The human body is designed to learn from struggle. This mindset seriously undermines students' ability to learn. And it's from Holdsworth Center, where you can find that work. He continued, and he also talks about another expert, rock star in the field, Dr. Joe Bowler. And she says here, all children are different in their mathematical thinking, strengths, and interests, says Joe Bowler, a professor of math education at Stanford Graduate School of Education. So I think this is interesting because, yes, all students are different in their mathematical thinking, strengths, and interests. So therefore, we have to work with their differences, their strengths, and their interests to find out how we can help them to become relentless. Whether it's, looking at their personality, establishing strong relationships, motivating them with incentives, speaking their language. Like, what is it that's going to drive them into, cultivate that sense of grit with our students and cultivate a sense of being relentless when they're looking at math or looking at other subject areas. And so, Dr. Yeager continues here. He says, and he's talking about Dr. Bowler. He says, when schools teach young people growth mindset mathematics, Bowler said, the outcome is that the subject becomes deeper and filled with more connections, so students enjoy it and continue to achieve and whatnot. And so, looking at this, the outcome is that the subject becomes deeper and filled with more connections. It should not be the other way around when there's that fear and students feel like they're working, against the brick wall. They feel like they're hopeless. It should be that when you are cultivating grit and you're using their ability to become relentless, that they're going to become filled with more connections because it's going to drive them. And no matter how challenging the math, they're going to go for it. But I'm telling you, that's going to take building relationships and having a layer of trust there. Because if the students don't trust, it's just going to be tough. It's going to be tough as nails trying to work through math in a classroom that feels cold to them. So, again, I think that we should also couple this with working with that child and working with those unique traits of that child to build those relationships so that they would want to try and they want to. We have to learn to see the child, like Dr. Seda talks about in her work, being willing to see the child and know what their needs are and to speak to their needs as we are also helping them thrive through grit. And so let's keep going. This article continued on. They spoke about, or actually, this is another source here. In the article Promoting Resilience, Retention, and Mental Math by Eisenberg et al., they describe why resilience and mental health deserve more attention in efforts to increase student retention. So the big talk has been student retention, accelerating the achievement and the growth and the learning of students. This has been the big talk, helping with the COVID slide, closing the achievement gap. All that sounds great. But at the end of the day, we have to promote resilience, retention, and mental health because we have to pay more attention to mental health in efforts to increase student retention. And so this is so interesting, right? Because for so long, it's almost like we kept mental health like that was for the guidance counselors. Let us focus on the math. Let us focus on the content. We're starting to see that, no, these need to be in cohesion with each other. These need to collaborate with each other. And so we need to do what we can to also get to know the whole learner and find out what is going on mentally. I spoke when we first opened up today about how students have that fear and that anxiety of math. And they feel like, oh my gosh, they feel like they're hopeless and they feel like there's trauma and there's things that they're dealing with. And then yet you want me to work out this math problem. I'm already going through all these fears, right? So in order to help our students, we have to first figure out what is going on. Find out what are the guidance counselors saying. What are the parents saying? What are the doctors saying? So that we can get a bigger picture of our students when we are trying to help them to become relentless. So that if we're dealing with a student that maybe they're socially avoidant, we know how to deal with a socially avoidant student or a student that's, just vibrant and bright, but they just need you to help them harness, their personality to get them to focus. We know how to deal with that student as well. Or if the student is dealing with anxiety or some other type of trauma or some other type of mental situations, then we can appropriately address those situations so that we can equip our students for success so that they can show that their proficiency in our math classes. So, that's what we really want to do. And so we have to start promoting resilience and retention and mental health, all of them. I'm going to keep going with that. They spoke and they also mentioned here that resilience is also an important determinant of academic performance. Look at that. And I know this is to be true because, students, they get really tired around April and they just kind of clock out. They need that resilience to persist and to finish and to push through. And so they need the teacher to constantly remind them and to scaffold them and to probe them and to say, you're almost done. You're almost finished. You've got this many days. You have this much time on this particular assignment. I see you're doing a fabulous job. And we have to continue to cultivate their grit and to harness their grit and push that that resilience in them, so that they can be relentless. And I think that once we do it right, they will be relentless and they won't need us. They won't need us to probe them. They'll just need us maybe for a checking point. And then the perfect situation is when you started out with the students. They might have needed you. They might have relied on you more. Maybe you're in like a Title I school, or you're at a school where there's just much need. But then you'll see that as time progresses, those students, they take over instruction, and then you're facilitating. So you're asking questions and you're guiding them, but for the most part they're owning it. They're owning instruction. I had an administrator or principal, rock star principal, in Hillsborough County, that he would say, one thing they looked for was who was doing the talking in the classroom. Is it the teacher doing most of the talking, or is it the student doing most of the talking? And what we really want, we think we should be doing most of the talking, but true learning, true education, the students are doing the most. They're doing the most of the talking. We're just sitting back and facilitating and making sure that, learning progressions and learning targets are being met. Success criteria is being met. We're making sure that the students know what they need to know, and that they are, just kind of dominating that content with the grit that they have. They have gritty mindsets. They're going for it, and they are showing proficiency. So with that said, resilience is also an important determinant of academic performance. And so let's keep going here. They also found here in the same work that how a student copes with mental health challenges could affect retention by detracting from students' ability and motivation. Listen to that. To complete schoolwork, making it less likely that they'll obtain good grades. This is huge. So how they cope with mental health challenges. We can no longer sweep these under the rug and say, oh, it's not a big deal. Because I'm telling you, a bad day is a bad day. A bad situation is a bad situation. And sometimes it is hard for a student to just grow numb and bounce back. We have to be sensitive and diligent at helping our students get back to their sense of self and back to their whole self, where they were vibrant and bright in our classrooms. If they're going through grief, if they're going through pain, if they just got out of surgery, or they're going through transition, we have to be sensitive to that, and work with those students and come up with a plan to help them to really cultivate their grit again, and to really perform at levels of proficiency and beyond in our classrooms. And so some of the things that we can do to kind of assist with this is definitely, having just different supports in place. But I think the number one thing is the teacher. The teacher makes and breaks the classroom experience. The teacher is the number one factor for student success. That's in Dr. John Hattie's work. Listen, the teacher is everything. If the teacher can understand this, I'm telling you, the teacher can work wonders. And I know for a fact this is true. So for instance, I'll talk about my story a little bit. I know this isn't about my personal stories, but I want to prove something. So, and I want to shout out this teacher because I love her. So I was a junior, and I was homeless in high school. It was tough. Long story short, I remembered when I had a math test that I had to take in my pre-calculus class, and the day of the test, that morning, about 10 minutes before my math test, I found out that my brother passed away. And I'm sitting there, and I had to go to my teacher's class. Thank God I had a great relationship with her. So I went to her class and I said, hey, miss, I'm not going to be able to take your test today. My brother just died. And I didn't know, guys, what I was going to do. I really did not foresee a future, a really bright future. I just saw trauma. I saw death. I saw depression. I saw that I was losing my mind. My brother and I were very close. And so it was like a part of my heart just fell off the earth. How am I supposed to deal with this? And so the thing I loved about this teacher and how she helped me build back resilience and relentlessness in her class is she didn't focus on the trauma and the grief. She came back to me with high expectations. Listen, teachers. Listen, leaders. She came to me with high expectations. And she said, okay, India, welcome back. And after they did their little love, they showed me much love in that class. And I'm still friends with many of them. Love y'all out there. You know who you are. They showed love. And I remembered after we got through that emotional state, oh, they were so good to me. That's, the relationships were there. And I remembered she just came to me and she was very sweet. And she said, here's the test. Are you ready to take the test today? Do you need another day? And I told her, okay, this is when I could take it. She said, okay. And then, I had some assignments that were due. And I remembered I had a B. I remember I had a B, like maybe a high B or so, but I was trying to either make up something or take something I was missing, and she was so patient. She was flexible. She changed the schedule so that it worked for me, and she didn't count it against my grade. She didn't give me a 0. She didn't give me a big 0 because I had just lost a brother. She was sensitive. She was flexible. Teachers, we have to hear this. Sometimes our students are doing things. They're coming back. They're sick. They came back from a family vacation. They just lost a loved one. They just had surgery. They just went to the doctor. And so many times it's tempting, right, for us as educators to say, listen, I've got to fill my grade book. I'm just going to give that 0 because they weren't here and I'm doing my job and it's off my chest. I don't have to worry about it. But sometimes we have to slow down a little bit and just kind of figure out how can we, reschedule this so that that 0 is not counting against our children and that they can still thrive in a classroom when life shows up. And when you do that and you build that relationship, that student will accomplish anything for you. Because my teacher did that for me, I would have done anything for her in those classes. I worked so hard studying hours and hours and hours to make sure I could be a stellar student in her class because she cared for me at a time I needed her the most. And it wasn't about just always meeting the deadline and it wasn't always black and white. She was flexible. And I'm telling you, if we can build relationships with students and catch them at a time when they are weak and they're going through and they need us the most, that too will build a relentless, gritty student who will perform off the charts for us if we give them a chance. So that's something that we want to think about. But I also want to go into, and thanks for letting me share that. I also want to go into looking at programs and strategies that can also, and this is also from the same article, the same work, programs and strategies to cultivate relentless resilience. You want to look into academic advising, and this is imperative. Like if you're in K-12, that's all your guidance counselors. We need to have a serious talk with guidance counselors. Guidance counselors do their best to steer a child in the appropriate trajectory, and they're very realistic. Many are so compassionate. We had some phenomenal, compassionate guidance counselors in Hillsborough County. Oh my goodness. And I know that guidance counselors, sometimes they get it right. Sometimes they might miss a little. We've got to work with our guidance counselors, and we've got to, continue to encourage guidance counselors to also help students to cultivate grit when they're having those little sidebar conversations. Sometimes guidance counselors say things because they see the data, but sometimes it could count against that student. I had a guidance counselor once tell me something about my ability to get into college. And basically what they were saying was that I would not be able to enroll into a predominantly white institution and be accepted because of just my background and different things and my humble beginnings. And that kind of hurt. I remembered that. And it affected me. It did. It kind of messed up my psyche a little bit to where I was like, oh, I don't know if I can make it. Is it really like that? But then it was like when I took a stab at it, I realized that was only an opinion. And so we have to work with guidance counselors to make sure that even though they have great opinions, if it's not a healthy opinion, if it's not going to steer a student towards success, how can we change that opinion so that we can still support the success of a student's trajectory towards college and career readiness? So not only guidance counselors, but also your college academic advisors, making sure that they're giving students multiple options, not just that one option, multiple options for their success so that these students can be relentless and find their path. We're constantly evolving and they have the right to evolve. They have the right to have options. So let's continue to support them that way. It also spoke about how we can provide peer support groups for students. And I think this is key because students do learn from students. Students do learn from other behaviors. This is why there's a lot of like observed, learned behavior that the silent, unspoken behaviors that we naturally take on. It is true that we learn from each other, whether we want to or not. We learn. That's why sometimes when you hang out with certain people for several years, you start talking like them, you start acting like them, and you're like, wait, where did that come from? Because yeah, we do learn from each other. And so students learn from each other. And sometimes students have that fear of authority. And so whenever you allow them to work together in peer groups, this is fabulous. Because if you have one or two that were really experts in the field and they understood the topic, then they can teach it to the student that might have a fear of the authority. And since that kid had a fear of the authority, there were guards up and they couldn't really process the information because they're dealing with fear. But around the peers, those guards come down and they're more willing to learn. This is why it's so imperative that we allow group work and collaboration, teamwork, things like that with our students so that they can learn not just from us, they can learn from others as well, including their peers. And I also think learning from other educators is key as well. There's nothing wrong, teachers, that when you're in the room, in particular in a math classroom, there's nothing wrong with saying, yes, I'm your main teacher, but I also have this, teacher online. I'll also have this, this other voice online. Or there's also the teacher across the street that does fabulous as well. There's nothing wrong with sharing wealth of knowledge for your students to be successful so that they can thrive. So just keep that in mind as you're working with your students and trying to get them to succeed academically in your class. Okay, the next thing is definitely having online programs for struggling students. This is key because sometimes you can't get it all done right there in the class, but having those supports off campus when they go home is everything. It's so imperative for their success because, again, you're dealing with the whole child. Yes, they want to know your math. Yes, they want to know your subject area. Yes, they want to know, your 2 cents and your input towards education. But maybe they do need help with, balancing, a budget, or, they need help with a social issue that they're dealing with, or a relationship issue, or family trauma, or something that they've got going on. They need your help. They need your support. So having online programs for struggling students would definitely help them. And then, of course, having mental health services like NAMI, looking at the NAMI chapters in your area and figure out, what are the, findings there. How does it pertain to the students that you're serving, and how can you help them? And maybe you can even give them some articles that they can look over to kind of assist them with their specific situations. Talk to families, talk to schools, psychologists, talk to resources, other resourceful leaders to help your students get by. It is so critical and crucial that we do all that we can and use all the tools in our toolbook to help our students. And also, I think, too, remembering the growth mindset, again, from Dr. Carol Dweck is everything, because the battle is lost and won in the mind. And we have to be willing to teach that growth mindset to students so that they become gritty. We can't just lay it out to them and say, oh, you got it. You got it. You got it figured out. You'll be all right. No, we have to help students learn how to speak properly about their success. We have to help students to become optimistic, giving them those statements that they can say so that they can begin to cultivate a growth mindset as they're working in class. There's nothing wrong with, helping them with positive I can statements and taking away any negative statements, any negative things that they say, challenging the student, getting them to write out on a journal and a book what they're saying versus what they want, to become. And looking at the pros and cons and helping them to really just kind of cultivate a positive package for their life, a positive package towards their success in the classroom, if that makes sense. So, those are some things that we do. And then, of course, one of my definitely close to my heart, the power of a mentor. So sometimes the student might need more than just the teacher. They might need more than just the coach. They might need a mentor, somebody in the community, somebody in the college, whether that's another teacher or like a dean, a professor, or an administrator or principal. They might need a mentor to kind of check with them, positive checkpoints, find out what's going on in that child's life. How have they been successful? What are they working on? They can check in with that mentor and really establish a positive relationship. That mentor can then connect with others to make sure that that student remains, in line and aligned to what their original success points were, and then they can all celebrate together. It's such a beautiful thing to be able to mentor students. If you've not ever mentored before, I highly recommend that you try to mentor a student, and mentor someone with a positive heart and a positive agenda, and you'll see how wonderfully mentoring others will serve you, in the end. So with that said, having a mentor is key. And then, of course, making sure that mentor understands the full picture of what you're trying to push for that student. What are those goals? Where is the student in achieving those goals? And then also maybe that mentor can help you with the incentives that you have for really rewarding that child and helping that child also to get to that next tier of success, whether that's graduation or enrolling into college or, whatever it is, however you want to serve the whole child. Now, listen, sometimes a mentor can help that child to become relentless by just telling stories of how they were relentless. Maybe that mentor can give them motivational videos, or that mentor can connect with other people in the field that they're interested in. That's what my mentor did. I loved how my mentor, Vicky, when I was a senior in high school, I wanted to major in engineering. Okay, so all you engineers out there, rock out. But I'm going to confess with you, I had an issue with vectors. And so I could only go so far. But anyways, I love vectors, but the vectors didn't love me as much. It's so anyways, so my mentor did connect me with an engineer. And I think he was an industrial engineer, and he was working on like traffic lights, and he was computing equations to make sure that, like when you're sitting at the light, and I think all of us have gone through this, you're sitting at a light and you're just sitting there and sitting there and sitting there and nobody's moving. And you're like, wait, why we're wasting all this time? What's going on? Well, he was working on equations so that that time would be decreased, so that people's time would not be wasted and they could get to places faster. Pretty cool. But it was not for me. So I wanted to be around people. He really worked, and he was very, very professional, great at what he did, but it was good for me to see that. And it was good for me to know, oh, that's what they do. Oh, okay, this is what the life of an industrial engineer is. And then I was able to say, well, I like math, but, maybe it's not industrial engineer for me, but that doesn't mean that I'm just throwing all of my math ability away. What else could I do? And that's when I was able to really say, okay, let me see what happens. And then I was able to, with the help of, leaders and mentors, try education, and I fell in love with it. Well, guess what? Mentors have the power to do the same. They have the power to help a child figure out which path they need to be on, and then which path they really are going to fall in love with versus the one that they might not be a good fit, but they can try this option over here, and then this actually is, maybe what their purpose is and what they can really do to thrive in society. So, with that said, having a wonderful mentor will definitely help a child to become relentless. So I want to encourage you, if you don't have, mentors, maybe, if you're a principal on campus, I love y'all principals out there. If you're a principal, maybe you can assign your teachers to be mentors of some of your students that you're really trying to get through, or you can assign guidance counselors to be mentors. There's so many different things that you can do to help. And then also there's local business owners and community stakeholders that are just willing to support and mentor. Maybe you can partner with a particular organization, and that organization could help you find mentors. There's so many different things that you can do. So with that said, guys, I'm so thankful again that you have been able to join me on the Let's Get Gritty podcast with Dr. India White. And I'll remind you of my announcements. Again, it will be featured on the Swain Girl Media channel. So check that out. Thank you, Precious Swain. Feel free to follow me on Facebook, Miss India White. LinkedIn is The India White. Twitter is Indie Speak and Teach. Instagram is Indie238. And YouTube is India White 123. I'm looking forward to connecting with many of you. If you are wanting also to check out my website, www.india-white.com, for books, blogs, and to schedule me for your next speaking event, you can. Also, if you are wanting me to maybe do some work with your school, I am offering grit workshops. So get me while you can so I can come into your school, work with your leadership team, whether that's your district, principals, administrators, teachers, or whatnot, and we can, cultivate grit and talk about grit all together and see results. I'm also willing to do work on equity for those across the nation that do receive that work. Let's make it happen. You'll find curriculum and stuff like that as well on my website. So just go ahead and hop on over to my website, www.india-white.com, and you'll find that if you want to schedule me to speak, or for any kind of other work that you need done in your schools, webinars, PLCs, and more, I'll be here for that. So with that said, guys, thanks so much for joining me again on the Let's Get Gritty podcast with Dr. India White. And until next time, stay gritty. Take care.